The sheet that I passed out there, get you one, is up here. So if you ever need an extra copy of it, they're right in this front area. These are the submission forms. So every time that we do an assignment, you are going to get a submission form that's going to go along with it. The submission form is basically your way to see exactly like what an assignment is, what the goals of the assignment are, and then when it's due and all that stuff, all the parameters that are going to go into it. When you have an assignment, you fill out this sheet. Typically you want to fill it out when we go through it before the assignment, or the first day or two of the assignment. That way you can see all the stuff. When you turn it in, you fill up, make sure the sheet is filled out still. You put the date that you turned it in at the bottom here, make sure your name is on it. You staple your artwork to it, so all those sketches that you have for things in your room, you'll staple that to this. You can make a copy and staple that too, that's fine. And then you'll put it inside of our folder up here, which is 2510. And then when I get your stuff inside here, I get your files that are on the server, I go through, I grade your stuff, any notes I put on these sheets, and then I put them into Canvas and return them. If you want to fix anything up, you fix up what comments I have, you say I'm going to resubmit this, and then you give me the sheet back, put your files back on the server, and then I can update your grade if you fix stuff up. Okay? So it's a pretty easy way for you to see this is what I got on my assignment, this is what's wrong with it, and then if you want to fix it, there it is. Okay? So our first assignment is the Miniroom. So the purpose of this is to understand the basics of Cinema 4D by just creating a room with some low-res props. Also I have this purple binder here. Any one of these I have, I put inside the binder. So if you don't get to copy it all during the lecture, that's fine. You can always come up and grab it out of here, copy it, then put it back. The due date for this will be January 30th, so that's a week from today. We don't spend a whole lot of time in this assignment because it really is just kind of like a nuts and bolts. Let's see how the interface works. Let's see how to model stuff and texture stuff, and that really is the gist of it. So we'll be doing some simple objects, a book, a chair, a desk, and then 3 other items that you'll put inside the room. So the bookcase, the chair, and the desk, that's what I'm going to cover today. So you can see exactly how we would build those 3 things. Basic textures, some objects with materials on them. Basic 3D lighting with some appropriate shadows. Smooth rendered camera animation, organized folder structure, scene layers. So we may not get to everything today, most likely we won't. But we should be able to do the start of this, which is just these basic items up here, the bookcase, chair, and desk, and then whatever 3 items you want to make. And then the rest of this we'll do on Monday. The rendering for these typically takes about 2 hours to render out. So if something is due Wednesday, by Monday before you leave, you should be like rendering this out, okay? So that means that if you need to come into labs on Fridays or Saturdays or Thursdays, stay late on Monday, whatever you got to do to get your stuff in, make sure you do that. The systems now have release 20 on them, so I would recommend using release 20 because that way you're using the same version you would have at home, or you're able to download at home. So make sure you do that as well. For the turn-ins for this one, you'll be turning in your artwork, like I said. So all the sketches you have of things that you've drawn for different props, you'll put those in. Even if you didn't model them in the scene, just to see that process of planning things out. The more research you do, the more ideas about what stuff look like, the better your models are going to be. It's kind of like if I go in to model a chair and I have no idea what a chair physically looks like, I'm just kind of going based off my memory, I may model the wheels a different size, or the legs a different size, or the back a different size, and all of that. So you really want to have reference for anything that you're going to model, especially as beginners to this. It's kind of like going into Photoshop and just starting to draw something. It's a lot easier if you have a picture of what you're drawing there. You'll also be turning in your project folder, which means everything. So I should probably exclude from that I don't want your rendered images. Don't want rendered images. Okay, and you'll see what those are when we actually render stuff out. Okay. The end product of this should be basically just a camera sweeping across our room. That's all it is, just a camera sweeping across the room for about 5 seconds. This isn't a crazy thing where we're zooming the cameras in and out and doing all these acrobatics with it. Every camera that we use should be considered like if it was a real world camera, what could you do with it kind of thing. And you typically wouldn't go crazy with a real world camera. Our resolution should be 960 by 540 at 30 frames per second. That'll be pretty much standard across all videos that we do. The class number and name is 2510 Intro to 3D, and there's 6 points possible. So not a lot of points, but again, it's just like an introductory assignment. The biggest thing that people lose points on in this one is not being organized. You always want to stay organized. So that means naming things, making sure we have layers, making sure our items are on there. Make sure your camera has a nice sweep. Make sure your materials look pleasant. And we're not expecting these to look photorealistic, but I'm just saying pleasant, like flat colors or natural colors, as opposed to everything is a bright neon color and it's like crazy headachy. Okay? So I'm going to print that and I'll throw it in this book up here, and then if you need to copy the rest of that down, it'll be up in there. Or it'll be at the start of the lecture. So whichever one you want to do. Okay? So I'm going to open up my Miniroom folder, or Miniroom file. And this is where we left off last time, where I showed how we can make a picture frame basically. We have our room, we have our picture frame that can also be used for a TV. And then we had some textures that are on top of that. And so what I want to go through is just how we can model other stuff. So sometimes it helps for people to model stuff inside the same scene. Sometimes it helps to model it outside and then bring it in. So Cinema is really cool with how you can do that, because if you go to File New, it'll actually make a new file. You can model stuff in and then bring it in there. So thinking about, for this assignment, obviously this is beginner stuff, so it's not a huge deal. But thinking about something you may want to use over and over and over again. If I built a street sign, I may want to use that street sign in a project I'm working on now, or I may make a video game, or I may make something else where I'm constantly bringing in the street sign that I'm going to use over and over and over again. Or if I have a standard building that I want to use, or a chair, or any of the stuff that we build, we may want it in a separate file that we can just have as a separate file and then bring that item into it, okay? So however you like doing your stuff is up to you. For me, I like to model stuff separately and then be able to just bring it into the other file. It helps me kind of stay organized. Now that might mean that I need to scale things up or down or adjust things, and I'm fine with that. But it helps me kind of stay organized with how I do my stuff. Okay, for this I'm going to model everything inside here just so you can see how it's inside there. Whenever you come into the computers here, make sure you go to your preferences. And this is what I mentioned last time. There it goes. You want to go to your files area, go to paths, and make sure that your folder that you've added there is your Miniroom folder. That way all your images will load, because you don't want to render your stuff out and none of your pictures show up, okay? So if this isn't here, Cinema will not know like where my pictures are located, because it's basically going into this folder and then into the other folder to get those pictures, okay? So I would hit Add Folder, I would find my folder, hit OK, and then I would go into my texture and just reload that image. Okay, or I can click the dots and then find that image again and it'll reload it. All right, so first thing we're going to model today is a bookcase. And we're doing, again, it's a simple bookcase. We're not going to do anything crazy with it. There you go, the whole family of bookcases. All right, so we always start with some kind of shape. So for a bookcase, what kind of shape do you think we should start with? Yeah, a cube. Okay, so we're going to start with a cube. So if you want to follow along, you can keep up at the pace, that's fine. If you get lost, that's fine. Take notes, watch the video later, and then just follow along with the video then, okay? So the first thing we do is we model a cube. Pretty simple. And then we want to get the proportions of the bookcase. How wide is it? How tall is it? How deep is it? So I'm just using the dots here just to push and pull and tweak to get the bookcase set up. I'm also going to go to the move tool and just set it on the ground. There we go. Okay. Now remember, most of the stuff can be changed later. It's just a matter of getting a general sense of how big this thing is. Okay. So those dots, that's what I'm using just to move it around and line it up. Perfect bookcase. If for some reason you don't see the dots, one of the things that happens sometimes is your selection mode over here on the left is set to points, edges, and polygons. It has to be in that modeling mode. Cinema does a weird thing where it defaults to whatever you had last time. And so if you were in that mode, it'll just jump back to that mode, which is kind of weird, but whatever. Cool. So I have my rectangle there. Now what I need to do is I need to create those divisions for it. Okay. So looking at this shape here, I'm just going to go to InDesign. Okay, so here's my bookcase there. Wonderful. Okay, so this is the shape that we currently have. What I need to do is create segments in this so that I can extrude and push them in. So basically I need to have these lines that would be, for my shelving. There. Okay, and I'm just doing this in InDesign because that's the program I had open. I don't typically do anything in InDesign. Okay, so this is my plan here. Each one of these areas is where the books are going to go. In order for me to make sure that the bookcase looks like a bookcase, each shelf has to have thickness to it. And so as I'm planning for this, I need to make sure that everything has thickness. So I need to have thickness around the border like I do here. And I need to have thickness right here for each one of these shelves. Okay? If I get rid of some of these lines like this, that just means that this area is more open. That's all it means. So if I wanted 5 shelves or 4 shelves or 17 shelves, I would just add more lines into this, okay? Now, how I get these lines, I could do a number of different ways. So let's look at a couple of those ways that I could do that. So one of those ways is if I click on my cube, I have my segments down here on the bottom right. I could increase the segments like this, and that would allow me to add divisions here. Now you'll notice that as I'm doing this, as I'm adding these segments, it's automatically dividing this evenly, okay? So it's not, like I need 2 segments vertically. That's what my beautiful sketch here has, 2 segments vertically. But they're obviously further off to the right. So typically we're going to add segments, but we're also going to need to tweak those segments to get them into the right spot. Okay? So that's fine, I can do that. That works. Same thing with the vertical. I'm going to go into the segment Y, and I'm going to add enough segments here. And this is why it helps to plan things out, to have an idea of it, because you may not know how many segments to add. You go into your modeling phase, you add, let's say, 1 too many or 1 too less, and now you have basically like either an extra line or you have an area that doesn't have thickness to it, okay? So if I look at this, I can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 segments in the middle. So as I come back here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. How many did I say? 9? 10. I said 10, right? Good. Someone was listening. Cool. So there's 10 segments there. Now, let's say I did accidentally add an additional segment. I can get rid of it. Or if I forgot a segment, I can add that in there. Okay? That's not a big deal. So I've added a cube. I scaled it up so it's proportions of my bookcase. And I have 3 segments here and 11 segments there. Yes, ma'am.
My segments aren't showing up. How do you make them show up?
Yeah, are you on the cube? Under display right here, change this to Gorad shading lines. without that, I don't know why mine still show up. I have something clicked somewhere, I'm sure. With shading lines, you should be able to see those divisions. So then you can put 3 segments in the X direction, so it goes left and right, and then 11 segments in the vertical direction. Now, just as a for instance, what if my bookcase was laid out like that? How would I get the segments on the other side to be laid out correctly? Correct. So I would just go 1 here, 3 there, okay? So just because mine's laid out one way and yours is laid out a different way, don't get like thrown. It's just a matter of you drew it that way versus the way I'm drawing it, okay? So now that we have the divisions on the cube, I need to be able to tweak where they're actually happening inside here, okay? Does anyone remember the key that allows me to edit the shape of this? C. Okay, so now I hit C, and now I can actually edit where those lines are happening. So I'm going to go to my edges, because that's what I'm going to be moving. And I'm going to go and double click a vertical edge, hold shift, double click the next vertical edge. All right, so now I could watch this and then you can do it the right way. If I go to move, I move this one over here, I double click that one, I go to move this one. I don't know if those are exact. Like one board might be 3/4 of an inch thick and the other one might be 7 inches thick. Obviously it wouldn't be that much, but it's not going to be exact. In 3D we don't need to be 100% exact, but if we can make it more exact, we should, okay? Right, like something from Dr. Seuss. So what I'm doing, instead of moving the edges left and right, I'm going to grab the two and I'm going to scale them apart. Okay, so if I hit the scale key and I just grab the red, I should be able to drag the red and scale that apart. Now you have to be careful if you accidentally grabbed, let's say, the blue or the green, it's going to scale them in those directions, which again gets you that Dr. Seuss bookcase. Or if you grab all 3, it'll do the same thing. Just grabbing that red bar. Make sure you're in the scale tool and just grabbing that red box, and then you should be able to scale that over. Make sure you're in scale, which is T. Okay. Now when I get to the next part of this, I'm going to do something very similar. I'm going to go to these top and bottom ones and scale those apart. Now realistically, if this was a bookcase, all the wood should be of similar thickness. This is where, you know, we are kind of exact, but not really. I'm just going to kind of look at this and say, you know, that's close enough. That's close enough. And then I'm just grabbing all my other ones kind of 2 at a time and then scaling those together. Again, you could move them, you could scale them, you could do whatever. As long as you have, you know, this kind of setup there. So once I have these things laid out, I have all these boards kind of in here, then the next step is pretty simple. All I need to do now, let's go to the bookcase, is I have these areas here where the bookcases or the books would sit. I just need to push those in. And like we talked about when we did our picture frame, I can't just grab the faces here and then push it in because that doesn't work. Do you remember the tool I used to push stuff in? Extrude, right? So if we hit right click and go to extrude on those faces, or hit D, then we can just click and drag to push that in. All right, if you mess up on these, don't think like, oh, I have to figure out a way to correct it. At this point, it's typically quicker. Let me just delete what I have there. Sometimes you'll get just weird results. Like sometimes you'll extrude and one of the faces will go opposite. Instead of going in like the rest of them, it'll go outward, okay? It's just something random that happens. So here I just made another cube real quick. Grabbing those edges again, scaling them out. Now in this case I made this and I'm missing an edge. One of my edges I just didn't count right. Maybe I put in 10 or 8 or some random number that doesn't work. So that right click menu is really going to be where all of your tools are at for what you're doing. So if I'm adding another line, you'll see in here there's a line cut, there's a plane cut, there's a loop path cut. These 3 are typically ways that we can add lines to this. Specifically for this kind of line that I need, I would use a loop path cut. And you can see as I move my mouse around, it's going to show me like this is the direction. So I can just say, oh, I forgot to add one there. And then I can switch back to my move tool and now I have that. And then I can grab these and just extrude it in again. And for all of these tools that we do, if you do it once, you haven't learned it. You've just followed those steps. You do it again and again and again, then you're learning it. Then you're understanding like, okay, I see how these things are moving. Okay? And you can obviously see there's a huge difference in being able to select things, or a huge advantage of being able to select the right things. Okay? So set that aside. You can come back to it after. All right. There will be some initial frustration in just doing any of this stuff. It's 3D. If you've never done 3D before, it's definitely different. You have to think about how things are constructed and think about how to select the right things and move and scale and all this. Okay, so this is the next thing we're going to create. And it looks intimidating, but it is the same exact steps that we just did. Okay, it's just a matter of creating a basic shape, putting divisions in the right spot, and then being able to extrude them in the right order. Okay, so this one I'm going to go faster, so don't even try to follow along with this one unless you're 100% good with it. Okay, so my first step is always for me, I mentally do this, but for you guys, let's visually do it. I need to create a basic shape. So I'm going to start off. I could start off at any point, really. I'm going to start off with what that desktop looks like, okay? So desktop is going to be that square shape. And then I need to create divisions for this as to where things are going to happen. Now, my end desk is not going to look exactly like this. Similar, but not exactly like it. It's actually going to be... it's going to have legs on it, okay? So something like this table basically with a hutch on it, okay? That's what it's going to look like. So I need to add divisions for this for where I think those legs should be. I hate that it does not automatically stroke a line. Why would you not do that? All right, there we go. All right, so there's that. Come on. There we go. Okay. So now that top desk, now I have the legs. There's where one leg is going to be. There's where another leg is going to be. There's where another one's going to be. And there's where another one. So now I'll be able to pull down those legs, extrude those legs out from that main area. Now with the hutch thing here, I'm going to consider that too. Okay. I can pull the hutch out of that same desk. So I'm going to use another division right about here, and this is where that hutch is going to be pulled out of, right in that area, okay? So my initial shape will look like this. It'll have 2 divisions going vertically, or left and right, and then 3 going the other way. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to make a cube. Whoops. Okay, so there's my cube. I'm going to go to my divisions, add 2 that way, oops, none this way, and 3 that way. Okay, so there's my desktop. I hit C, I go to my edges, and then I'm just going to put these in the spot where I want them to be. Now, just like the bookcase, where these points end up at is how thick those legs are going to be. So if I made these boxes bigger, they're going to be like chunkier legs. If I make them smaller, they're going to be like thinner legs. Okay? Again, something you can change after the fact, but just something to consider at this point. Okay, whoops. So once I have this, you can see it's kind of like floating in air. That's sort of my desk height. I'll probably just move this down just a bit. There we go. So now I'm going to grab these faces here for each one of the legs. And you'll see that same exact thing. Go to extrude, extrude it downward. Okay, there's my chunkier legs. Now I'm going to use or create the hutch part. So I'm going to extrude this whole part here, this top piece. That's where the hutch is going to basically like grow out of. But I don't want these here. I want those to be a little bit thinner because this is going to be the thickness of the boards for the hutch. So those are going to be a bit thinner. So in this case, I didn't double click to go all the way around because I just wanted those ones on top, just these here. Same thing with this. Maybe I'll take these 3 and just move, whoop, not down, move that back. Okay. Every time I move stuff, I'm grabbing the arrow and moving the arrow. You never want to just grab randomly and move it because something like this, it's moving obviously up and down, or it's moving front to back, or it's moving side to side. That doesn't make sense. So I want to make sure I move it in the correct direction to get it perfectly lined up. Something that beginners will do a lot is I'm just going to grab a bunch of stuff. So sometimes they'll grab a bunch of stuff and just kind of like that. And then they don't see it because they're looking at it at some random angle like this until you look at it from the front and then you're like, holy cow, what have I done? Okay? And if that's the case, you delete it, make a new one. All right, so now I'm going to grab my hutch pieces. Okay, so that's where the hutch is going to be. I'm going to go to extrude, and I'm going to pull it up. Okay, now I pull it up until I get to the bottom of the shelf. Come on. And then I'm going to pull it up to give the thickness of that board. And then I'm going to extrude it again. And then I'm going to extrude it again. Okay, so now what I've done is just created those divisions. There's where the thickness of my boards are at. Now I could have also, let's undo, extruded this one time straight up, and then went to my loop cut and just added in those lines too. It's the same exact thing. We're just adding divisions where we want stuff to happen, okay? And then this part, there it is. Now let's say that I wanted divisions, right? So undo that. If I want divisions in here, I want something like, let's say this thing here. I want to have these areas there. What do I need to have there in order to isolate that corner? If I want to be able to select just this corner here and not the rest of this, what do I have to have separating it? A division, right? And you'll see that's the same thing. Extruding, beveling, and divisions, the knife tool, the split tool, those are the 3 I use all the time. Every single thing. If you look at a car or a person, those 2 things or 3 things are things used all the time. So insert loop path cut, go here, go there. And now I've just isolated those 2 things, and now I have this little cubby right here, and then I don't know why I didn't grab that other one too. There we go. And now I have that division right down the middle. Okay? So you can create a million things just based off of these few principles of just doing that. All of these, same thing. Now, if I wanted something fancier, let's say one of these shelves in the middle, I could try to model it out of the same thing, or I could just create a cube. Make sure I'm in model mode here. Just shrink that down, stretch this out. And just stick that inside there. Nope, they're not connected. And they're just tucked inside each other, and that's fine. Okay? If this was something that, we were going to have maybe explode, maybe I would need to do that. Okay? Even in our bookcase in the back, I could have done the same exact thing I did for our picture frame, create a cube. Do it real quick. I could have just created this cube here, hit C on it, grabbed this face, extruded inner, and then extruded in, like that. That gives me the foundation. And then just created another cube, and then just use this to create all my shelves. Whoops. Okay? So there's no big advantage at this point to doing it one way or the other. The biggest thing is mobility, right? So if I wanted to move the shelves, it's super easy. I can just grab one of the shelves and move it here, or grab this and move it there. Either way works, okay? If you're doing something for a video game, typically you want things to be like one piece. So that would be one piece in a video game. I would try to get it to be one piece. Even the books that are on it, I would try to get that all to be one piece. And you'll see, like, if you ever look at video game models, sometimes this is the model for a video game, for like a bookcase, just that. And then they'll put a picture of a bookcase with books on it right in the front, especially the older stuff. Right. So what we saw there is no difference than what we have here. It's just we're at the beginning stages of it, and once we know more tools and tricks and whatever else, we can really start applying those things, okay? So that's essentially how we would do a desk. Boom, desk is done. Now I'm going to build a chair real quick, and you'll see it's the same process, the same exact steps. This is going to be a chair with legs. Nope, I should just look up a wooden chair. There we go. So something like that is what we're going to be building. Okay? I'm going to go something a little more rough than that, but ideally that's what we're going to be doing. So I start off again with that same shape. At this point I don't need to go into InDesign and show you the lines because I know what the lines are going to look like. I know that I'm going to start off with that square shape. This is the pad of the chair. I'm going to add, bless you, I'm going to add some lines for the legs, not there, right there. So these are where the legs are going to be pulled out of. So now I can go and edit that. And again, how thick do I want those legs to be? That's what I'm going to adjust here. So let's say like that. And maybe even like the front ones are a bit thinner and the back ones are maybe a bit thicker. Grab this on the bottom. This and this. There we go. So the back ones are a bit thicker legs and the front are a little bit thinner. Okay? And you'll see it's the same process. Grab those corners and just extrude them out. Now if you need to stop like halfway through and extrude, and then you start extruding again, it'll extrude it again. So I have now 2 extrudes here. Once you've done it once, you can just grab the arrow and just move it. Okay, so now that's the legs. So now I need to do the back. Okay, so this will be another tool that I commonly use. So first I'm going to do is set up what I want the poles to be. So I'm going to grab my $25 off. I'm going to grab the size of this. That's what I'm looking at, is how big do I want these to be. So I'm just going to pull this back, take these 2 and maybe pull these out like that. And then I'm going to grab these and just pull them straight up. Just extrude straight up like so. Okay, and now with my desk here, I can obviously see like that's the size of my chair and desk together. If I needed to adjust it again, I could tweak it afterwards. Once I have this, now I need divisions down the middle. Now with this, it's a little bit easier to go into subdivisions here and just add them like this. That way it's like as I'm extruding, I'm putting them up. Otherwise, I'd have to add divisions here, then add divisions there separately. It won't add them at the same time. So while I'm doing this, I'm saying, okay, here's going to be the back of the chair, like the top part. Then I'll have a bar that'll go across, and then I need one more bar. So I probably need 5 of these like this. Okay. Now I need to connect these 2 edges. I could extrude, pull them out like this, but they'll never be like right on top of each other and they'll leave like a gap. So another tool that I use is called bridge. And bridge basically says face here, let's put them together and actually connect those 2 faces. Create a bridge between them. And it's simple to use. You just have to get the lineup of your viewport correct so you can see both faces. And then I would just drag one face to the other face, and you can see where that line is going to connect. That's how it's going to connect to it. So I basically want to make sure that this edge here, that corner, is going to connect straight across. And there it is. Do the same thing on the next one. So I'm going to switch back to my move tool, grab the next 2, go back to bridge, click, drag, there we go. Back to the move tool. Oops, come on. I hit the wrong key. And there we go. So now we bridge the back of that. Now that's a pretty uncomfortable looking chair for sure. So now I need to add division so I can round off the back of it so it's not perfectly square. So back to loop path cut. I'm going to click. This is a nice thing on the top. It allows me basically just say add 2 divisions there. And it'll evenly space those 2 divisions. And then I can just go into my edges, double click, double click. Don't think of modeling as a, something like drawing. Think of it more like sculpting, like you're just adding detail and then adding divisions and adding more detail and then adding divisions and adding more detail and adding divisions. Okay, so there's that. And I think I also want to take these 2 little top things and just pull those up a little bit and then take these subdivisions back off. Come on, off. There we go. So now I have a little bit of rounding happening there. Maybe for the chair seat, I can do the same thing. So I'm going to go to my loop path cut there and there. Actually, I don't think I need that one. Just get rid of that one. So I'm going to right click and dissolve it and it goes away. Okay. Now this is where we could adjust some of the stuff. If I look at this and say, wow, the bottom of this chair is like really thin compared to the chunkiness of the top, I don't think that would actually support someone's weight. I can simply go into the faces here, find a good angle so I can actually see them, and just grab all these faces underneath. So all the pieces that basically make up that bottom, and then just move it down. And so now I have a little bit more thickness to that seat bottom, and then it's good. Okay, so pretty quickly you can create some very, very different kinds of shapes for your scene. It's just a matter of understanding and being able to apply splitting, extruding, and eventually we'll get into beveling a bit more, but for today we're not. All the stuff I have here, these are all done with just basic shapes. This is a cone that I extruded to give some thickness to. This is a cube that I kind of squished down. I added some divisions around this side and then I smoothed it out using this thing. Just so you can see it, here's my cube. Depending on what proportions you want your pillow to be. I'll add some segments this way. Go to my edges here and scale those out a bit. And then I'm going to hold down Alt and add that. Oops. I forgot I also have to add a bevel here. I don't want these edges here, there and there, to round off like they were. So I'm going to add a bevel like this, and that way when I alt-click that, it does not go in as much. There we go. So that's kind of my pillow that I used. I had a little bit more stuff happening to it, but that was essentially it. This here too, just again another cone that I just kind of modified the shape of it for that. And then my disco ball. Okay, this was actually just a sphere. Changing one of these default types, I didn't like that. I didn't like that one because it was kind of like weirdly spaced right there. Didn't like that one, and I ended up with this one. I thought that was a cool division of how that's set up. Okay, so I'm going to take this lecture, I'll put it up on Canvas, I'll put it up on YouTube, and you can watch it and kind of follow along. That way, if you need more time in one area or see exactly more what I'm doing, then you can check it out. Once you have your items kind of in here, then it's just a matter of placing it. Scale's too big, like that desk might be huge, just scale it down. Fit into position. If the legs are too short or too long, you can grab the points for the legs and just make them longer. Oops. Or shorter, or whatever you need. Okay, you had a question back there? No? Same thing with the bookcase. Take it, stick it on the wall. Oops, don't forget the shelves. Probably should group all this stuff here. That, nope, 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 nope. Alt-G, there we go. And then stick that on the wall. It's a huge bookcase, by the way. It's covering my picture frames too. Okay, questions on that yet?